The 2016-2017 season was a legendary season for Isaiah Thomas. He broke out from being a really good point guard to being one of the best players in the league. He led the Boston Celtics to the #1 seed, and despite only being 5'9", averaged almost 30 points per game and finally managed to fix his inefficiency problems of the past. He was one of the most talked about and hyped up players in the league, and was so good that he finished 5th in MVP voting. And with him only being 28 years old in the middle of his prime, everything was looking up for Isaiah Thomas, right? Well, sadly, you'll be wrong, because 3.5 years later, he's yet to resemble even the sliver of the player he was before. He's struggled to stay on the court and NBA teams, and as we speak, he's currently not signed to one. So, what happened to this young star that was so much fun to watch and supposed to be the Boston Celtics superstar for years to come? Today, we'll be talking about the tragic story of Isaiah Thomas. What's going on, NBA fans? Hope you're all having a great day. I'm at Zayat Sports, and if you're new here, I make consistent basketball content, so if you're interested in that, definitely think about subscribing and like the video if you don't mind, because it definitely helps out, and I'm trying to grow this channel as fast as possible. Now let's get into the reason why y'all are here. Let's talk about Isaiah Thomas. And in my opinion, he is one of the greatest underdog stories of all time, while at the same time, one of the most tragic. And there's no other way to start, in my opinion, than to start from the beginning. Isaiah Thomas was a 5'9" guard coming out of the University of Washington, and he was the 60th pick in the NBA draft. Yes, 59 selections before him, and the Kings were the only team willing to give him a shot. And I don't blame him. He's really small for the NBA, and for a league that's based on size and height, that's a risky pick right there. But I think the Kings were happy to see that they probably got the best 60th pick of all time, as he came in and was already averaging 11 points and 4 assists. And through his 3 seasons in Sacramento, he was actually very solid. And his last year, he averaged 20 points per game and 6 assists. But sadly, the Kings were not willing to pay him $6 million a year, so they signed and traded him for a nobody. After signing with Phoenix, he started the 2014-2015 season off a little slow, I assume due to a change of scenery, but after a mere 46 games, they shipped him out to the Boston Celtics. And the Boston Celtics, that's a great trade that they made. They didn't give up much, but they got an amazing 6-man who led them from being outside the playoff picture to the 7th seed that year. And while, yes, the Cavs did sweep them, you could see the immense potential of Isaiah Thomas on the Celtics. Next season, during the 2015-2016 season, things changed for Isaiah Thomas, however, because he became the starting point guard for the Boston Celtics and had a career year while doing so. He averaged 22 points per game, 6 assists, was seen as one of the best scorers in the league, and an up-and-coming point guard in the NBA. Now, although he did break out this season, he still has flaws, as for one, people said he was too small, couldn't play defense, and they're right, he's only 5'9", 185, and he physically couldn't guard some of the bigger players or the smaller players. He was one of the worst defenders in the league, and I completely agree with that. On top of that, his uptick in scoring caused his field goal efficiency to go down a little bit, so that was another problem people had with him. I don't think Isaiah was worried about the critics, however. He never really was, as he put this team on his back and made them better than the year before, as they ended up getting the 5 seed, and they faced the Atlanta Hawks in the first round. And I remember it was a pretty good series, not the best, but it was decent. And they took them to 6 games. Now, I will say, Isaiah Thomas's efficiency was really bad in this series, and it was probably a big reason why they lost. If he could have played to his regular season standards, they might have won. And honestly, people didn't take him too seriously after that, I don't think. So coming into the next season, nobody could have guessed what would have happened. Isaiah Thomas really took that bad playoff performance to heart, though, and he put in a lot of work that offseason. And you could definitely tell just by how good he was on the court next season. You thought 22 points per game last year was good. Well, in the 2016-2017 season, he averaged 29 points per game, 6 assists, best field goal percentage of his career, best free throw percentage of his career, upped his 3-point attempts to 8.5 per game, and still upped his percentage on them. And he just looked like a stud out there. He might be short, but he did whatever he wanted on the court. There could be 3 people guarding him. He was going to drive in. He pulled up on 6'10" defenders all the time. He didn't care, man. He was a master at creating space and getting the ball in the basket, no matter how many hands and arms were flying above him. This man was literally on TV every single day, whether it was him playing a Celtics game, whether it was them talking about him on First Take, talking about him Undisputed, talking about him any other sports show, or really all the above. He was the man of the year, and everybody was talking about him. Shit, they were even comparing him to Allen Iverson at one point. He was so good that he got one of the littest nicknames of all time, King of the Fourth Quarter. And he deserved it too. He was so amazing in every single fourth quarter. It seemed like he was dropping like 10, 15, like just in the fourth. It was insane. Like every night he would lead comebacks. He was just one of the clutchest players in the NBA. And during the season, he had the most points per game in the fourth quarter for the past 20 years until the end of the season. Westbrook actually passed him, but still, in 20 years, you average the most points per game in the fourth quarter. That is absolutely insane. Just an example of how good he was in the fourth quarter. On December 20th, he scored his career high, 52 points. But going into the fourth quarter, you want to know how many points he had? He only had 23 points. And then he goes off for 29 points in the fourth against Miami and gets his career high. That's just insane, man. He can do a lot more than earn a nickname, though, as he earned a spot on the All-Star team. He earned a spot on the All-NBA second team. He led his team to 53 wins. And he led his team to the first seed in the NBA playoffs. And at this moment, I bet Isaiah Thomas felt like a king. He felt like he was on top of the world. And he was that man. And that's why I feel so bad for him for what happened next. His world got turned upside down, and it's really not even fair, man. So it all started right before the NBA playoffs. His sister, China Thomas, died at 22 years old in a tragic car accident. And it devastated him so bad, he didn't even know if he'd be able to play in the NBA playoffs. But if we already see about Isaiah Thomas, he has heart and determination like no other. And if he didn't have that, he couldn't have ever made it as far as he did in the NBA, being as small and outmatched as he is against every other player. He just put on his game face and he just played some basketball. He has said that was the best way to forget about the pain, man, just to play, and he played his heart out. They ended up getting away with the Bulls in 6 games, and they looked pretty good out there. And I know he was still struggling with the death of his sister, but day by day, the basketball was just, that was his love, man. He loved the sport, and it was helping him get by day to day. But it got even worse in round 2. They were up against John Wall and Bradley Beal, the Washington Wizards. And Isaiah Thomas just got banged up this series. He looked like the best scorer of all time in the series, by the way. He looked like Michael Jordan. He even scored 53 points in one game, and he was going crazy. One game, he hit the floor real hard and knocked out a tooth, and he had to have a 6-hour dental surgery after one of the games. He hurt his hip so bad that he could barely play, but he was still out there just dropping like 30 a game, and he would not let his team die. And this is him going through the death of his sister. He knocked out a tooth, and I'm sure that shit was hurting him. He was dealing with a very hurt hip, and at the end of the day, he led them to beat the Wizards in 7 games. Now, this playoff run had a positive and negative for him, mainly negative, but in terms of positive, that was the best performance he's ever put on in that Washington series. I've never seen him play better, and he was an absolute monster, looked like one of the best scorers of all time, and he will always be remembered for that. That is a great thing. The sad thing is, he was totally loyal to the Celtics. He was like, I'm under contract, and I'm going to play and help y'all win games. He's like, I'm going through a death of my sister. I'm going through a hurt hip. I fucked my mouth up. I don't care. I'm going to keep on playing for y'all, keep on balling, and I'm going to lead y'all to the 3rd round. Well, when the 3rd round came around, the conference finals, his hip was just hurt too bad. He couldn't play in that series then. And he had to sit and watch as LeBron just dismantled the Celtics that he worked so hard to carry to the conference finals. Going through all that and having to sit on the sideline and watch your team lose would be bad enough. But what happened next was worse. So to start out with the offseason, he had an interview and they were talking about his contract extension, and he had this response.
You've seen a number of guys this summer get that payday, Kyle Lowry and others. How does this make you view your impending free agency? Because it's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a max guy, so I deserve the max, and we just gotta continue to take care of business on the court and let the cards fall where they may. But I'm happy for all the guards and all the other guys getting their money because they deserve it. But I mean, my time's coming. They know they got to bring the Brinks truck out. They know that.
Isaiah Thomas, Boston Celtics. Thanks so much.
Though saying Brinks truck is kind of modest, because they need to bring Brinks trucks, because if he would have signed the contract extension after the 2016-2017 season, he would have made well over $100 million over 4 years, or if he would have waited till the season after, he would have made almost north of $200 million over 5 years. And I wanted Isaiah Thomas to get that contract. I wanted him to get it, man. He deserved it. He put his blood, sweat, and tears his whole life into basketball. His whole life he made about basketball. And he was always an underdog no matter where he went, but he still beat out his peers. And he was 5th in MVP voting this past year. I mean, this man was a monster. And he sacrificed his body to make this Celtics team get to the conference finals. And what did? And I'll tell you what they did next. They did one of the shittiest things I've ever seen an NBA team do. They stopped looking at him as a person. They stopped looking at him as a guy who sacrificed for them. They stopped looking at him as a guy who was damn near the MVP of the league that year. All they saw was a 5'9" point guard who still had trade value, but they were concerned that the hip he hurt may be a long-term problem, and they screwed him over because they traded him to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Kyrie Irving. Now, in terms of a basketball move, this was a great move, I'm not going to lie, because they got Kyrie Irving, one of the best point guards in the league. But in the meantime, y'all screwed Isaiah Thomas over. Like, y'all could have at least gave him a contract extension before making the trade or something, man. It didn't even have to be $100 million, but the fact that you didn't give him any type of money when he was expecting payday, I mean, that is disgusting. And NBA fans on Twitter, Instagram, all that, they broke out on this. They were like, I mean, they were pissed off. I was too, and it just showed that loyalty between franchises and players, that's kind of over. And for the most part, you don't even see players stay with franchises that long anymore, and this is the big reason why, because if something happens to how good you are as a player, I mean, you're not going to get that money. No matter how good of a person you are, they're not going to give you the money. So you just can't stay loyal over your own well-being anymore. So after getting traded to Cleveland, he had a very bad stint in Cleveland, got traded mid-season to the Lakers. He didn't do anything there. He's been on the Nuggets and the Wizards since then, and it just hasn't been good for him. He's stunk it up on all those places, and I don't think he's been healthy since then. Well, according to the man himself, he hasn't been healthy until about 2 months ago. So that was over 3 years it took him to fully recover from that hip injury that he sacrificed his body for. And at this point, no team believes him anymore, and no one wants to give him a chance. Man, it's just so sad, man. He's supposed to make $200 million, and he ends up making about $2 or $3 million since then, and now he's out of the league. No one wants to give him a chance, and his career is probably over. Now, sadly, I know he wouldn't be an MVP player or anything like that anymore. I mean, the hip injury took its toll on him probably, and on top of that, he's got 3 years older, and prime for guys his size just don't last as long. So he may never make another NBA team, and I really hate to see that because he was one of the funnest players to watch in the NBA. But by all means, Isaiah Thomas, if you're somehow watching this, I'm for sure rooting for you, and I damn sure think every NBA fan is. So keep on working, man, and best of luck to you. Well, that was the rise and the tragic fall of Isaiah Thomas's NBA career. Like I said earlier in the video, if you liked the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to me if you want to see more. I would definitely appreciate it. It helps out a lot. But until next time, it's Sports out.